We're counting down 35 incredible facts about Texas that most Americans have never heard. From cities growing faster than entire states to energy output rivaling world powers, these entries go far beyond cowboy cliches, revealing how Texas quietly shapes national security, global markets, and even America's future risks. Some facts will shatter the myths. Others may change how you see state and country power. Let's dive in, beginning with fact number 1. Zoom out on the map, and Texas doesn't look like just another state. Its economic borders stretch farther than most countries, bigger than Canada, Russia, even Australia. Oil rigs flare in the Permian, wind turbines sweep the Panhandle, and container ships line up along the Gulf. In Dallas, tech campuses rise beside cattle ranches. Houston's skyline pulses with energy money, while ports move billions in exports every year. The numbers are staggering. An economy of $2.7 trillion, more than 70 billionaires, and cities growing so fast they redraw the map every decade. Underneath the cowboy hats and barbecue, Texas is a power center that quietly shapes global trade, energy, and even the future of America itself. What happens here doesn't stay here, and the next fact will show just how much is at stake. Claims about Texas's economic muscle are not just headline hype. The $2.7 trillion figure comes straight from the Bureau of Economic Analysis and the Texas Comptroller's annual reports, two of the most trusted sources in the field. To compare Texas with entire countries, analysts rely on global rankings from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Those rankings place Texas alongside national economies like Canada and Italy. Every number you will hear in this story is anchored in public data, not marketing spin or backroom estimates. That is how Texas's global ranking holds up, by the same rules used for sovereign nations. ERCOT runs about 90% of Texas's electric grid, but it does not answer to Washington. Instead, it is overseen by the Public Utility Commission of Texas, called PUCT, whose 3 members are appointed by the governor. After the 2021 grid crisis, state lawmakers restructured ERCOT's board. Now, a majority must be Texas residents, and board members are chosen with input from both regulators and industry. This setup gives Texas direct control over its energy system, but it also means that when the grid fails, the responsibility lands squarely on state regulators and the ERCOT board. Every decision, from weatherization to market design, flows through this web of local governance. Jobs, affordable land, and lower taxes are pulling people to Texas suburbs at a rate few places can match. Corporate headquarters are relocating from high-cost states, bringing thousands of new jobs. Developers race to build master-planned communities, often on the outskirts of Dallas and Houston, where open land is still plentiful. Families find they can buy a new home for a fraction of what it costs in California or New York. No state income tax sweetens the deal. As companies and workers flood in, housing markets heat up, and new schools, roads, and shopping centers appear almost overnight. The result is a modern migration boom reshaping the state's future. Texas leads the nation in energy production, but it is not just about oil. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the state generates more electricity than any other state, with a mix that is as big as its reputation. Natural gas powers nearly half of all electricity in Texas, while coal and nuclear together make up about a fifth. Texas also claims the largest wind fleet in America. Wind turbines now supply around a quarter of the state's power, with solar climbing fast. This blend of old and new energy sources means Texas can light up cities, run factories, and export power, all on its own terms. Texas stretches more than 350 miles along the Gulf of Mexico, giving it a maritime reach that rivals many countries. This coastline is more than a backdrop. It is the reason Texas controls some of the busiest ports in America, from Houston to Corpus Christi. Every day, tankers and container ships funnel oil, chemicals, grain, and cars in and out of the state. But that same Gulf exposure brings a hidden risk. Hurricanes and tropical storms threaten the very infrastructure that powers the Texas economy. Ports, refineries, and export terminals are built right at sea level, where one major storm can halt trade and ripple across global markets. Political donations, board appointments, and real estate deals are the levers that turn Texas wealth into power. Campaign finance records show that energy executives, real estate magnates, and tech investors pour millions into state races each election cycle, shaping everything from tax policy to infrastructure spending. Billionaire-backed foundations fund university research, while private interests often hold seats on boards that oversee public utilities and regional planning. Major development projects, highways, stadiums, even entire neighborhoods frequently involve public-private partnerships where private capital steers the design and timeline. These channels don't just build cities, they set the rules and priorities for who benefits and who gets left behind. King Ranch sprawls across 825,000 acres in South Texas, bigger than Rhode Island, and it has been owned by a single family since the 1800s. King Ranch is a single property on a massive scale. This kind of land concentration is not just about cattle or oil leases. It gives ranch owners enormous sway over water rights, wildlife policy, and even rural elections. Debates over aquifer access, hunting regulations, and land conservation often start on ranches like this, with private interests shaping public decisions. Political donations and behind-the-scenes negotiations ripple out from these gates, touching everything from local school funding to statewide environmental rules. In Texas, who owns the land often writes the rules. Houston's title as the energy capital of the world isn't just about oil rigs or corporate logos. Here, more than 5,000 energy companies run everything from global finance to pipeline logistics. The city's ship channel forms the backbone, a 52-mile artery that moves crude, chemicals, and refined products from Texas fields to buyers on 5 continents. Trading floors in Houston set world prices in real time, while engineering firms design the next generation of refineries and wind farms. When a hurricane or supply shock hits Houston, the ripple spreads far beyond Texas. Fuel prices spike, markets react, and supply chains scramble from Europe to Asia. The city's influence reaches every corner of the global energy map. Permian Basin, oil fields pump more crude each day than some OPEC nations, but the story beneath the surface is less stable than it looks. Every new well delivers a burst of oil, but production from each drops sharply within months, a pattern known as the decline curve. To keep output rising, drillers must constantly punch new wells into the ground. When oil prices dip or investors demand cash returns, drilling slows, and overall production can flatten or fall fast. Pipeline capacity, called takeaway, also puts a cap on growth. If crude or gas cannot move to market, wells get shut in. This cycle of boom and bust means the world's top oil field is always just a few steps away from its next squeeze. Texas exports more goods than any other state, but how those exports leave the state reveals its hidden fault lines. Nearly half of all outbound trade moves through Gulf Coast ports, where oil, chemicals, and grain are loaded onto tankers for global markets. Pipelines carry natural gas and refined fuels to Mexico and the Midwest, while rail lines and trucks push manufactured goods north and east. Each channel comes with its own risks. A hurricane can shut down maritime terminals overnight. New tariffs can choke off rail shipments. Pipeline bottlenecks can force producers to sell at a loss. The state's global reach depends on these arteries staying open, and any disruption can send shockwaves far beyond Texas. Letters from Sam Houston, land grants signed by President Mirabeau Lamar, and the original currency notes bearing the Lone Star seal are not relics in a museum, but the backbone of Texas's claim to independence. The archives in Austin and the Texas State Library hold treaties signed with France and Britain, official records of the Republic's Congress, and diplomatic dispatches negotiating annexation with the United States. These primary documents confirm that Texas operated as a fully recognized country for nearly a decade, issuing its own laws, raising armies, and managing foreign policy. Today, legal scholars and historians still sift through these records to trace how Texas secured rights and privileges that no other state has, setting up the legal puzzles that still echo in courtrooms and capitals. The idea that Texas could split into 5 separate states comes from the Joint Resolution for Annexing Texas in 1845, which allowed for that possibility with congressional approval. Modern legal scholars agree, Texas cannot divide itself unilaterally, and it certainly cannot secede. The Supreme Court settled the issue in Texas versus White in 1869, declaring that no state can leave the Union on its own. The 5-state clause survives mostly as political theater, a talking point for campaign speeches and headlines, not a real constitutional loophole. The power to redraw Texas borders still rests with Congress, not Austin. In January 1918, the tiny border village of Porvenir became the site of one of the darkest chapters in Texas history. Texas Rangers, joined by U.S. cavalry and local ranchers, rounded up 15 Mexican-American men and boys, some as young as 16. Without trial or evidence, they were executed on suspicion of banditry. Court records and survivor testimony later revealed no proof of wrongdoing. Only grief and silence were left behind. Decades passed before the state acknowledged what happened. In 2018, a historical marker was finally placed at Porvenir, sparking new debates over how Texas remembers its past and the legacy of the Rangers. Mission control transcripts from NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston preserve the moment when Neil Armstrong's first words from the lunar surface were transmitted. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. These original tapes, stored in NASA's archives, capture not just a technical achievement, but the voice of a city that became the center of the space age. Every mission since has begun with Houston's call sign, cementing the city's place in both American memory and global history. The echoes of that radio transmission still shape how the world sees Texas, as a place where the impossible can become routine. Handwritten diaries in the Rosenberg Library describe families tying themselves together with rope as water rose through Galveston streets on September 8, 1900. Letters preserved by the Galveston Historical Foundation recount neighbors clinging to rooftops. Entire blocks swept away in the darkness. In the aftermath, city leaders combed through survivor testimony to understand what went wrong. Their findings led to the construction of the Galveston seawall and a massive project to raise the island's elevation. Those decisions changed hurricane policy across the country. Today, these archival records are still cited in debates over coastal risk and disaster planning, proof that one storm can rewrite the rules for a century. Driving across Texas from El Paso to Beaumont takes nearly 12 hours. That is longer than it takes to cross several entire European countries. The state covers more than 268,000 square miles, stretching farther north to south than the distance from London to Rome. A single road trip can take you from dry desert in the west to pine forests in the east, with hundreds of miles of ranch land and city lights in between. To put it in perspective, you could fit the United Kingdom, South Korea, and Hungary inside Texas's borders and still have room to spare. That kind of scale shapes everything: weather, culture, and even how long it takes to get home for the holidays. Texas holds more ecological variety within its borders than most countries. Deserts in the west, pine forests in the east, rolling prairies, and miles of Gulf wetlands. That diversity means the state's resource policies are a constant tug of war. Ranchers and oil companies compete with conservationists over water from the Edwards Aquifer and over the management of sprawling grasslands. State parks, watershed authorities, and private landowners each guard their turf, shaping how rivers are dammed, how land is grazed, and where development stops. Every drought or flood brings new fights over who controls the next drop of water or acre of open space, with the stakes rising as population and industry keep growing. Texas leads the nation in tornadoes, tallying over 100 in most years, more than any other state. But the sheer size of Texas means twisters strike somewhere almost every week during peak season, stretching local emergency crews thin. Volunteer fire departments, county EMS, and small-town police often become first responders, running rescue operations and setting up shelters long before state aid arrives. In places like Wichita Falls and Jarrell, tornado seasons have forced entire communities to rehearse disaster drills, stockpile supplies, and build networks for rapid response. Each spring, local officials and neighbors know the drill. Sirens, warnings, and hours spent waiting for the all clear, hoping the next funnel cloud misses their block. Houston, Dallas-Fort Worth, and San Antonio do not just stand alone. They are bound by highways, rail lines, and digital networks that move people and freight across Texas at a scale few states can match. Distribution centers near Dallas supply stores as far as the border, while Houston's port feeds goods to rail yards in San Antonio and beyond. Workers commute between metro areas for jobs in tech, energy, and logistics, creating a flow of talent that blurs city boundaries. These corridors are Interstate 35, Interstate 10, and Interstate 45. They are not just roads, they are the arteries of a state-sized economy, connecting factories, hospitals, and research parks into one vast, integrated machine. Wind turbines in Texas now generate more electricity than most countries, but getting that power onto the grid is a balancing act. Wind does not blow on demand, so operators have to manage sudden drops or surges, a problem experts call intermittency. When there is too much wind and not enough demand, ERCOT sometimes orders turbines to shut down, a process known as curtailment. To smooth out these swings, developers are pairing wind farms with giant battery banks that store excess power for when the grid needs it most. Massive new transmission lines stretch from the panhandle to the cities, moving wind energy hundreds of miles. These upgrades are turning Texas into a laboratory for managing renewable power at scale, exposing both the promise and the limits of a system built around the wind. Engineers, teachers, and medical professionals are arriving from California, New York, and Illinois, drawn by tech jobs and the booming energy sector. At the same time, retirees from the Midwest and Northeast are settling in for the lower cost of living and mild winters. International migration brings in new languages and skills, filling gaps in healthcare, construction, and logistics. These newcomers aren't just chasing jobs. They're reshaping Texas's labor market, bringing new expertise and fueling a surge in entrepreneurship. As the population diversifies, the political landscape grows more unpredictable, setting the stage for a state where no single group holds the majority. No single group holds a majority in Texas anymore, and that reality is changing how the state runs. School districts now offer translation and dual language programs to serve students who speak Spanish, Vietnamese, Urdu, and dozens of other languages. Public health departments must tailor outreach to communities with different traditions and medical needs. Election officials face new demands to provide ballots and voting materials in multiple languages. Expanding access for naturalized citizens and longtime residents alike. As the population grows more diverse, state and local governments are forced to rethink everything from curriculum to healthcare delivery to the way political coalitions are built and challenged. Military bases in Texas aren't just outposts. They are economic engines that anchor entire communities. Fort Cavazos, Joint Base San Antonio, and Fort Bliss support more than 1 million veterans statewide, shaping local economies through steady jobs and federal investment. Veterans Affairs hospitals in cities like Houston and Dallas handle millions of patient visits each year, while veteran-owned businesses add billions of dollars in revenue. Transition programs help former service members move into the Texas workforce, filling roles in everything from logistics to advanced manufacturing. These networks of care, commerce, and community support stretch across the state, making military service a permanent thread in Texas's economic and social fabric. Texas classrooms have become a proving ground for educational adaptation. Schools across the state now run extensive English as a second language programs, with teachers earning specialized certifications to support students from Spanish, Vietnamese, Urdu, and dozens of other language backgrounds. Districts in Houston and Dallas have launched dual language curriculums, while rural schools often rely on state grants to hire translators or purchase multilingual materials. These efforts stretch budgets and demand new training, but without them, thousands of students would be left behind. The rapid growth in linguistic diversity is forcing school boards to rethink everything from classroom staffing to how textbooks are selected each year. Houston's reputation as America's most diverse city doesn't erase the lines that divide it. In neighborhoods like 3rd Ward and Gulfton, median household income can be less than a third of what is found in River Oaks or West University. Public transit routes, grocery store access, and even emergency services are far from evenly spread. School funding often depends on local property taxes, leaving campuses in poorer districts with fewer resources and larger class sizes. While over 100 languages echo through Houston schools, opportunities for advancement do not always cross zip codes. Diversity here is real, but so are the barriers that keep opportunity out of reach for many. Tax abatements, infrastructure upgrades, and even direct grants are common tools when Texas cities compete for the next big corporate campus. Local officials argue these deals bring thousands of jobs and new tax revenue, but the price tag often includes decades of foregone taxes and costly public improvements. In Austin, the agreement for Tesla's Gigafactory included millions in property tax rebates, with the promise of long-term employment targets. Critics warn that when job projections fall short or companies automate, taxpayers are left carrying the cost. Public records requests have revealed heated city council debates, with some officials pushing for stricter disclosure and clawback clauses. The result is a high-stakes balancing act, betting on growth today, while hoping the returns will last for generations. When tech giants set up shop in Texas, the effects ripple through every corner of city life. High-paying jobs draw in software engineers, data scientists, and designers from across the country, raising average wages, but also pushing up housing prices at a pace many locals can't match. Service workers and teachers often find themselves priced out of neighborhoods they have lived in for years, while traffic jams stretch commutes longer and longer as new developments sprawl outward. For many, the promise of opportunity comes with the reality of rising rents, crowded roads, and a growing gap between those who benefit from the boom and those left navigating the fallout. Low corporate taxes and a regulatory climate built for speed are powerful magnets for company headquarters looking to relocate. Texas offers no state income tax and a business-friendly legal system, making it easier for executives to cut costs and streamline operations. In Dallas, real estate is cheaper than in New York or San Francisco, and sprawling suburbs provide room for custom campuses and logistics hubs. Access to a deep pool of skilled workers, many drawn by the same affordability, gives companies confidence they can fill jobs fast. Compared to the high taxes and tight rules in California or New York, Texas promises a leaner, faster, and often more profitable way to run a business. Inside Houston, the medical center operates like a city within a city, spanning 2 square miles, with more than 100,000 people working across 60 hospitals, research institutes, and medical schools. But its influence stretches far beyond patient care. Each year, the center handles over 10 million patient visits, fueling a constant churn of clinical trials and medical breakthroughs. The scale of research here spins off biotech startups, draws billions in investment, and trains thousands of doctors and nurses who fill hospitals across the country. This powerhouse drives regional growth, but the demand for care and innovation is so high that even the largest medical complex on Earth is under pressure to keep up. Cargo planes and passenger jets make Texas a crossroads for global business. DFW International Airport moves nearly 1 million tons of cargo each year, linking factories in Dallas and Fort Worth to markets in Asia, Europe, and Latin America. Houston's Bush Intercontinental and Dallas Love Field add to the network, handling everything from electronics to fresh produce. Major airlines use Texas as a hub, funneling travelers and shipments through the state 24 hours a day. This non-stop flow of goods and people fuels job growth, attracts new companies, and keeps supply chains running, even as booming populations put pressure on every runway and highway connected to these airports. Texas leads the nation in both economic growth and in the number of people without health insurance. More than 5 million Texans lack coverage, the highest uninsured rate in America. Public schools face wide spending gaps. Wealthy districts can spend thousands more per student than rural or low-income districts, shaping everything from class sizes to graduation rates. In major cities, affordable housing is in short supply, while rents rise faster than wages. Hospitals in poorer counties struggle to keep emergency rooms open, and many families travel hours for basic care. These gaps are not just numbers, they shape daily life, fueling debates over whether to boost public spending or to double down on the state's pro-growth model. After the 2021 winter blackout, Texas lawmakers passed Senate Bills 2 and 3, forcing power plants and parts of the natural gas system to prepare for extreme weather. The Public Utility Commission and the Railroad Commission now oversee new weatherization rules, with fines for non-compliance and new requirements for critical infrastructure. Power companies must file annual reports showing they have upgraded equipment, and regulators have launched surprise inspections. But many natural gas facilities still self-certify, and gaps remain in backup power and coordination. Despite tougher laws, experts warn that vulnerabilities in the grid and gas supply have not been fully fixed. Federal rankings put Texas at the top for natural disaster risk, but the reality on the ground is more complicated than any index score. FEMA and NOAA rate dozens of Texas counties as high risk for hurricanes, floods, wildfires, and tornadoes. Yet gaps remain in local planning and readiness. Many rural counties lack the funds to update evacuation routes or build storm shelters, while fast-growing suburbs often outpace their emergency services. Statewide, only a fraction of communities have completed hazard mitigation plans required by FEMA. Insurance markets are starting to reflect this, with rising premiums and shrinking coverage in high-risk zones. Even with new state policies, Experts warn that Texas's preparedness still lags behind the scale of its threats. City budgets in Texas are hemmed in by strict property tax caps and complex funding formulas, leaving local governments scrambling to keep up with explosive growth. State law limits how much cities and school districts can raise property taxes each year without triggering a public vote. That means vital upgrades to roads, water lines, and schools often get delayed or downsized. Economic development deals designed to lure new companies with tax breaks and incentives can drain future revenue that might otherwise fund basic infrastructure. The result is a patchwork of underfunded projects where political choices and legal limits force tough decisions about what gets built and what has to wait. A sudden drop in oil prices can ripple across Texas faster than a winter storm. When crude fell below $30 a barrel in 2016, and again during the 2020 pandemic, drilling rigs went quiet. Tens of thousands of jobs vanished, and state budgets lost billions of dollars in tax revenue. Climate policy adds another layer of risk. If global markets penalize carbon or accelerate the shift to renewables, Texas faces stranded oil assets and shrinking export power. Policymakers are weighing options, ramping up energy storage, diversifying into tech and manufacturing, investing in green hydrogen, and building out wind and solar. The next chapter for Texas depends on whether it can adapt before the next shock hits. The numbers, the stories, and the contradictions in this film come straight from the sources that shape the real Texas. Economic power is not just a headline, it is anchored in the Bureau of Economic Analysis, Texas Comptroller reports, and global rankings from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Energy dominance is documented by the United States Energy Information Administration and the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, which lay out every barrel of oil, every megawatt, every blackout. When we talk about hurricanes, droughts, or tornadoes, the facts come from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service, not rumor or memory. Demographic trends are drawn from the United States Census Bureau and the Texas Demographic Center, tracking every new arrival and shifting population line. If you want to go deeper, those data sets are open to the public. Search the Bureau of Economic Analysis for State Gross Domestic Product, the United States Energy Information Administration for energy production, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas for grid reports, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration for disaster records, and the United States Census Bureau for population shifts. Every claim you heard has a paper trail, a chart, or a hearing transcript behind it. That is how you separate myth from reality in a place as loud and complicated as Texas. Thanks to the researchers, historians, and policy experts who helped make sense of the numbers and the history. And thanks to the communities and families who shared their stories, even when the facts were hard to face. If you want more investigations that cut through the noise, subscribe to Hard Truth Untold. Next time, we will be pulling back the curtain on another American powerhouse whose risks and rewards go far beyond the headlines. Until then, remember, what happens in Texas rarely stays in Texas. The story is always bigger than the state. Across all 35 facts, one thing stands out. Texas isn't just a big state. It's a force operating at the scale of entire nations. Its wealth, diversity, and risks don't just shape Texas, they shape America's direction. What happens here can ripple across the country and the world. In Texas, the line between state and superpower is already blurring. Drop your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories that dig beneath the... Thanks for watching till the end. You're the reason this channel keeps digging deeper. If you learned something new today, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps the algorithm push this truth to more people who need to hear it. Your click doesn't just support the channel. It helps shine a light on the stories others overlook.